Hello and welcome to Destination Draft Day, your one and only spot to listen to two nerds talk about the NFL draft. Nick, happy Monday. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Probably doing not as well as Sam Darnold, who's very happy that he is no longer a New York Jet, as he has, just before we came on the show, traded to the Panthers for a 2021 sixth-round pick and a second and fourth-round pick in 2022. We'll get into that. But first, Michael, everyone was asking when you were gone on Friday, what is Michael possibly doing on a beach? Were you looking at film? What were you doing on vacation?
Definitely was looking less at film as usual. But, there were definitely some nights where I was gathered up in the hotel room writing out some reports. So little vacation, little break, but never sleeps for the scouting industry. That's for sure.
There you go, Michael. Very dedicated to his craft. All right, so let's talk about this trade here. First, we'll take it from the obvious perspective, the Jets' perspective. They actually got a lot more than I thought they were going to get for Darnold. You thought they were going to get at least the second and third round pick there, which they did, plus the sixth. So pretty on par with your expectations. But you look at that, and now they're obviously taking Wilson. Sam Darnold no longer with the Jets. How do you look back on his tenure with the Jets, and how do you feel about the package they were able to get for him?
Well, I think what this tenure with the Jets kind of explains is exactly what is going to happen with this QB class. There are 4 QBs that are being highly touted as these high ceiling prospects. And while they definitely have this high ceiling, the big part of it is landing in a good spot that A, can help you develop and come along well, B, can put a good supporting cast around you, and C, just making that transition yourself as a prospect from the college level to the NFL. Sam Darnold as a prospect, he was the absolutely correct pick for the Jets at the time. But the issue was the Jets had issues in terms of, putting together that roster to really help him succeed. Adam Gase obviously had a poor tenure as well. And, I don't think that Adam Gase 100% deserves blame. I do think that he was an awful head coach, but I think there was an awful roster that was built as well. Mm-hmm. When you have a young quarterback, you need to try to find a way to support them as best as you can. You look at 2 very similar situations when they first got drafted, with Josh Allen on the Buffalo Bills and Sam Darnold on the New York Jets. In terms of offensive talent, they both had horrendous offensive lines, a weak running game, and a weak set of receivers. The Bills went out and invested in the wide receiver spot, getting guys like John Brown, Cole Beasley, and then eventually getting Stephon Diggs, investing in that offensive line to where really this entire offensive line on the Bills is set and very solid. And then you look at the Jets, they finally got Mekhi Becton, but it wasn't enough to make up for the rest of the offensive line struggles. They had, a guy like Denzel Mims this year, but he was a second-round rookie wide receiver. The issues for the Jets, maybe you can look at Darnold and say, look, he didn't play as well as he needed to. And I absolutely agree. He should have been better. But there's a huge part that falls into it in terms of development and helping your QB take those next steps. And the Jets didn't do it. So hopefully, we can see some career resurgence with the Carolina Panthers. And there's no better person to do it than Joe Brady. And now it kind of comes down to, will the Panthers kind of invest in that offensive line, especially with a class that is up right now that has tremendous offensive tackle talent. In the mid-rounds, there's so many guys like Deontay Brown, or even earlier guys like a Creed Humphrey or Landon Dickerson that can help out the interior offensive line. So the Panthers have the receiving weapons. DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, those are weapons that are going to be cherished by Sam Darnold compared to what the Jets had. But at the same time, the Panthers still have some steps to do if they want to help Sam Darnold really recover what was a shaky start to his career. And I just really quickly want to bring in our main man of this website, Mr. Chris Landry himself. Chris, we're just talking a little bit about the new Sam Darnold trade to the Carolina Panthers. So we wanted to get your thoughts on Sam Darnold in terms of both how the Jets handled his situation and if you think that there's anything left in the tank for him to find success in Carolina.
Yeah, I think one of the misunderstood parts about the draft is how players are developed, and it is essential. There's a lot of players that have ability. Certainly, a lot's on them to be hard workers. Always, particularly at quarterback, want to know what's the capacity and willingness to learn. But it has to be in good situations. The Jets have been awful. They've been awful around him, and so the whole development has been non-existent. And the reality is they have kind of, through the 3 years, just have done really nothing to aid that. There have been points in breaking down film where you see the ability. But because they've done a poor job of putting a team around him, it is impossible to evaluate him correctly. All the Jets are doing is hitting the reset button and say, well, we're going to get another young quarterback and we're going to, hope to develop with a new regime. And I think Joe's done some good things. We'll see, though, how well he can put a team around the quarterback that he drafts, or else we're sitting here and talking about the same situation. If Sam Darnold was in this draft, he'd probably be the second pick in the draft by the Jets. But if they don't do as good a job of building a team around the quarterback, it won't make a whole lot of difference. I think there are good quarterbacks in this draft, but I think Sam Darnold is an example of a guy that was every bit well thought of in my world of in the NFL, hadn't been developed. So we'll see how well. I bet he'll have a much better career in Carolina, better coaching, really good, probably an up-and-coming team that can get better. So I think it's a lesson to learn when people say, well, who's going to have the best career? I'd be willing to bet whoever San Francisco drafts going to have the better career. Why? There's a better team around them. I mean, it's as simple as that. I mean, if you take Patrick Mahomes, who's kind of the poster child for the great quarterbacks in the league today, can do everything. You put him on the Jets, and they're not making the playoffs, and people are saying, boy, that guy makes a lot of plays, but he makes a lot of mistakes, and he turns it over, and they don't win many games, yada, yada, yada. The point is the quarterback position is the most important position, but it's the most dependent. And I think even you saw it in the Super Bowl with the offensive line problems, and they couldn't get a whole lot. I think that gets lost. It's people that maybe treat the draft kind of like fantasy football, like this and that. It's about team building, and the draft is the starting point. It's not the end point. And I think for so many of these players, they're not developed very well, and there are different reasons for that. But that's been the case with Sam, and I'm excited to what he can do in Carolina. And, we'll see. Obviously, I think we know what the Jets are going to probably do, but I'm curious to see what it is they do as a team in building around the quarterback that they do take.
Yeah, I think,
absolutely. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Nick.
I was going to say, Chris, welcome in here to the show. Really excited to have you on. It's quite possible that we could be sitting here in 4 years doing this show talking about the Jets picking a new quarterback and trading Zach Wilson again, because like you said, it's very important what they're putting around them. I did some research here. I'm going to read you guys a list of some quarterbacks, or all the quarterbacks drafted in the first round in the last 10 years. It's going to take quite a long time before you guys can stop me and hear a player who's still with his team. So we start in 2011. Cam Newton goes number 1 overall to the Panthers. He's gone. Jake Locker, remember all the hype from him coming out of Washington? Everyone thought, can't miss prospect. You got Blaine Gabbert, went to the Jaguars. Christian Ponder, that's the first round in 2011. Andrew Luck, he retired in 2012. RG3, he gets hurt. Ryan Tannehill, he's still in the league, but he's not with the Dolphins. Brandon Weeden, he was very hyped coming out of Oklahoma State. He was 28, though. 2013, one of the worst drafts for QBs, EJ Manuel. He goes in the first round to the Bills. He doesn't last too long. 2014, who could forget the Jaguars taking Blake Bortles at number 3, and the Browns at the end of the first round to getting Manziel. Teddy Bridgewater goes to the Vikings, and I'll give that a good pick there because you don't know what would have happened with Teddy Bridgewater if he didn't get hurt. He was on his way right there to a great career. Winston goes first in 2015. He's not with the Bucs anymore. They have Brady. They win a Super Bowl. Mariota, he's backing up right now for the Raiders, although I'm a little surprised he didn't say, I'm not restructuring my deal, because I thought there was plenty of opportunities for him this offseason where he could have potentially latched on as a starter, so I was surprised. Paxton Lynch, who could forget that in 2016 going to the Broncos. Then you got 2017 where he actually finally got some quarterbacks who are still there. Trubisky goes number 2. He's backing up with the Bills now. Of course, Mahomes, he's there with the Chiefs. Watson's still there with the Texans. We'll see what happens. Not only does he have legal issues, but he doesn't want to be there, so we'll see what happens there. But still a quality pick there. 2018, it was a really solid draft. So other than Darnold, everybody's still in place. Mayfield, he looked good. The Browns, they turned around with him. Allen looks like he could be an elite quarterback. He's on the right trend. Josh Rosen, what happened with him? He didn't really get a fair shake. Gets replaced by Kyler Murray. Lamar Jackson, MVP. Tua Tagovailoa goes in 2019 to the Dolphins, and so people are already doubting him after 1 year, which is crazy. And of course, how could we forget the great pick by the Washington Redskins of Dwayne Haskins? Unbelievable pick there. Daniel Jones, we'll see what happens with the Giants. And then last year, of course, with Daniel Jones, we have Joe Burrow. We got Herbert, looks great. And Jordan Love, if anything, he just, enabled the Packers to get an MVP season out of Aaron Rodgers. So with all that said, I know it's a lot, guys, but it's a true crapshoot when it comes to drafting a quarterback here. We didn't even mention, I didn't even mention Russell Wilson going later on the rounds there. So just because everybody basically has the same top 5, and we'll look at our top 5 soon, doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's looking the same way and it's going to work out that way.
Absolutely. And when you look at it from a hindsight perspective, a lot of these rankings for QB or any position are going to change. We talk about guys like a Trevor Lawrence, a Justin Fields, a Zach Wilson, a Trey Lance. These guys are great QB prospects, but if they don't go in a place that really builds around them properly, effectively uses their strengths to make the offense produce, then we could very easily be talking about these guys as, wow, that pick really didn't work out. And it's easy to blame the QB, but a lot of it falls on the coaching, the GM, the drafting, everything that happens. It's all about team building, like Chris Landry said. And really, it's just going to come into, how do you play to these QB strengths? How do you adapt to what they bring to the table? And what do you put around them? And, Sam Darnold obviously had his moments, but there were so many times where you just kind of felt bad for him because that Jets team was horrendous.
Well, yeah, there's no question that the discussion about how this guy is going to change your fill in the blank team or whatever. Look, having done this and having drafted a quarterback and drafting Steve McNair and been a part of the process, it's a lot different than I think people know. I think the thing that is changed so much is the instant gratification and how people are going to make snap judgments on what you think about a player. And we just talked about with Darnold and any quarterback, it's now, do you want to give him that 5th-year option? By the way, Carolina is going to pick up Darnold's 5th-year option. Obviously, you don't make the trade if you're not. But it's kind of a race to know what you have before you sign a guy to his 2nd year. And it used to be a little bit even riskier to draft a quarterback because normally going back and the last bonus baby was Sam Bradford. But imagine taking a quarterback in the top 5 and paying them the guaranteed money that they used to get. So the reason why all those players were drafted and many of them didn't work, it's just the reality of pro football. If you have a good quarterback, a really good one, it doesn't guarantee you that you're going to win. But if you don't have a good one, it guarantees you that you won't win. So just the idea of I've got to have a quarterback, and if I don't have one, I'm going to take a chance here, take a chance there, take another chance year in and year out. And a lot of those guys don't pan out. Why is that? Well, there are different stories behind every one of those cases, but some of it, guys were overgraded. I mean, I have this all along, and I tell people all along, the grading scale that I have worked with for 30-plus years that I still do with teams is there's anybody that's a 6.4 grade is high 2nd-round value. All those quarterbacks with 6.4 grades are automatically going to go in the top 15. They have for years, from Flacco to anybody, Tannehill, all those guys. And they're the whole point of the exercise is this is where they are, but the importance of the position and the need for the position is so unique there that it just, I'm not going to have my job as a head coach or the general manager if I don't fix it. If the Bears don't fix the quarterback situation somehow, some way, those guys are going to not be there. And it often leads to a decision that's not the best decision for the future of their organization, but it is the only decision for the people that are currently there. And so you get that. You get a lot of risky moves. And this is why if you have a good quarterback, it's why it's so important. I mean, you mentioned Paxton Lynch. I mean, it's kind of comical because the Cowboys were just bending over backwards to try to move up in that draft to get Paxton Lynch and couldn't do it, and they got Dak Prescott. And so you have a lot of those situations, and I can go back to stories in the early 80s of decisions that we've made, but it's a different world. The quarterback position is more valued, more important. It is the toughest to fill. It's the toughest to develop. And if you change coordinators, you change head coaches, you change GMs, you start over, you've got all those factors to say, well, I don't want that baggage. I'm starting over fresh. And then now you throw in the second contract, which is so different, so important, that if you don't know, if you don't have your answer, and that's the only thing right now that is to the benefit of, say, if you're the Jets, we're going to have 3 years plus to evaluate the quarterback that we draft, where we don't think we can build a good enough team quick enough to truly evaluate Sam Darnold. And so we're not going to be comfortable picking up the fifth-year option because we've not done a very good job of building a team around him. They're not going to say that. I'm saying it for them, but that's the reality of where they are. That's the way it is today, and it's why you lead to a lot of decisions. Yeah, there's no question we can talk all day about Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields and Zach Wilson, where they go, how they're coached. Are they in the same system, same people coaching them 4 or 5 years from now? Do they put a good team around them? That's the answer to who has the best career, long-term and short-term.
Right. Even I love that you mentioned, you put a great quarterback on a bad team doesn't mean much. Even Patrick Mahomes and the Jets last year, they're not a playoff team. I love that we have you on here because I've always wanted to know this. What are the thoughts, inside football, the people working in the front office about the rule, the fact that you have to decide on that fifth-year option before the fourth year? Is there a reason for that? And do you ever see that changing where it could just be picked up after the fourth season?
No, I think people like it. I think people like the option to be able to make the move, which is why also, you like I always say too, it's the other reason why if you like a quarterback at the top of the second, you soon take him in the first because you get the extra year to evaluate. It's tough. And it does depend upon where they're going. Look, I think that the best way to develop a quarterback, just to tie what we've talked about, you put a good team around a quarterback, but also if he can sit a little bit. It really does help because when you take a young quarterback and you throw him in, you can do some things that he's familiar with from his college game and he can have some early success. But when things settle down a little bit, it just becomes difficult and their head's swimming and they tend to go back and it's tougher to develop the guy because instead of doing things the right way, they just go out and just play and it retards their development a little bit. So I do think having as many years to evaluate at that position more than any is important. It really is. It's a different position because you have to know everything that everybody's doing on your side of the ball, on the opposition, and that's a tough deal. And look, I mean, you can go back to Bill Walsh and Joe Montana. Bill Walsh had Joe Montana worked half-field reads for 3 years. And I mean, and it's a complex game. I get it. People say instant success with Patrick Mahomes, but even he's progressing, a little bit by little bit mentally, but he can do so many things physically and he has so many options that it looks great and the result is great. Yet, he'll be able to do things from an improvisational standpoint that just belies coaching to some degree, but once he begins to start to really feel things and see things, it can only get better. But usually that corresponds with your physical skills eroding, and you become a little bit more reliant on the pocket and whatnot. So yeah, there's no question about. I mean, I saw Peyton Manning struggle with over 30 interceptions in the rookie year. Nobody was as prepared as you can to be in the league coming out of college than Peyton, and he was swimming. I mean, he was. So everybody has a lot of things to suggest people, well, you simplify for the quarterback. Sure, you can simplify. You have to simplify so the quarterback can be effective. But the more you simplify, the easier you are to defend because you're running simpler systems. So the race is always, how can we simplify, not put so much in his plate, develop him, let him grow, but then just be able to add more and more, because the more we're able to add, the more he's able to handle, the better he's able to be. And this is why sometimes people get frustrated with guys and they want veteran guys, but where do you go to get a veteran quarterback? It's just not, there's a reason free agency works differently than the draft is you protect your best players. Whereas in college, you can go get the best guy. So.
Yeah, we have some questions for you from our audience. But first, I want to let everybody know that for a look at the game of football from a coaching, scout, administrative perspective, go to LandryFootball.com today. From high school, college to the NFL, from recruiting to the NFL draft to free agency, from pregame to postgame film analysis to all the inside scoop on players, teams, coaches, and schemes. LandryFootball.com is your source for all things football. So, Michael, why don't we take a look at some of our audience questions here?
Yeah, absolutely. And some of these, maybe are more jabs than genuine questions. But the first one we got, who's worse at evaluating QB talent, Elway or Kelly with a winky face? There's always been some issues with John Elway with Denver. But when he was able to get Peyton Manning, I mean, that showed that, sometimes it's just a QB away. You look at these Chicago Bears teams, Ryan Pace has done a fine job of building this roster for a lot of it. I mean, maybe not now with all these guys kind of ready to leave, but you look at if they had someone that wasn't Trubisky at QB, that team could have very easily been contending for some Super Bowls during that reign. And missing on the QB spot, it hurts. And, both these GMs obviously have had their issues, but it really just, I don't know. It's hard to really crash them down as a GM when they've built good teams that are very QB dependent.
Well, I think with Elway, obviously he recruited Peyton Manning. It wasn't like he unearthed Peyton Manning out of nowhere. I mean, we knew he was a great player. And I think recruiting him, and the biggest thing he did is they said, Peyton, you come here and we're going to run your offense. And basically he's going to run. And that quite frankly was the closeness, even though they were competitors. It was the reason why Tom Brady was excited about going somewhere, because despite it wasn't put that way, and you see a lot of Bruce Arians' offense in Tampa, that if you watch the whole red zone of the Bucs, that's all Peyton. That's all Brady in the New England red zone offense. There's no question. We talk about Paxton Lynch and, Elway struggled. The key guy that people are really not familiar with behind the scenes, Elway didn't have as much of an impact in the draft as people thought. Guy named Adam Peters, who's basically making the Niners look good and John Lynch look good, was really the heavy lifter in their scouting department. Really good. And the defensive coaches at the time, Foxy and Del Rio, were the guys that really pushed for Von Miller and a lot of the defensive group. But you're right. That was a good team. I think that Elway got a little exposed when he had to evaluate a quarterback. And, boy, I don't know that anybody missed as many guys. Give him credit for trying over and over again. I mean, you got to, but he didn't. He didn't. Even a blind squirrel finds a nut sometimes. It was bad. And look, it just goes to show you it's a different game. And I've been around a lot of. I work with Ozzie Newsome. We shared office space, and Ozzie was good because Ozzie learned the game with us, with Belichick. He learned how to coach and he learned how to evaluate. Elway, unfortunately, he's an icon, and he learned a little bit of the business side because he was involved in an ownership involved with an Arena League team, but he really had no background in scouting. People think this guy's a Hall of Fame quarterback. Who's better at evaluating quarterbacks? Just about anybody else that's ever coached a position and scouted for years. That is a big difference, and I think we saw that. I think whether it's him or whether it's a Matt Millen, who are really good players, Hall of Fame caliber players, doesn't make you a Hall of Fame caliber GM or even good as a guy like Ozzie Newsome, who's a Hall of Fame player, but was a guy that learned it from the ground roots. I think that if you don't build a solid foundation and you don't study and learn, and we have a lot of people that come from a different side now, from the business side, and they get involved in personnel. Quite frankly, that's why I think you got so many organizations that don't do a really good job. But I'm not criticizing it because it keeps me employed as a consultant, because you get a lot of people that really don't know football, they don't come from the scouting background or the coaching background. I think it's really hard. There's no way I could evaluate players for 30 plus years if I hadn't coached, because it's just, there's so many things you call upon, scouting, the draft and the talk about who's going to go where is the fantasy part of it. But the real scouting angle is how to evaluate a player. What are the critical factors? We try to do a lot of that. It's like, well, who's the top 5? Well, there is no top 5, top 10. There is, where are the grades? Do you grade players correctly? Then you stack them, and then you make sure that you grade them regardless of need. And then if you grade them correctly, you set your draft board up with integrity. And then if you've got players within the same grade plateau, then if you can take a player of need, because you've essentially said these players are graded equally. I think the experience over the years of doing it, like anything, is the key. And I think some of these guys just don't have a real good feel for it, enough good experience. So that's why I'm very curious to see what I've known Urban Meyer since he was a graduate assistant met him when he was a GA for Earl Bruce at Ohio State. I'm curious to see how well he's going to do. He and I have talked about the NFL for years, and I'm curious to see what he does. He's got Trent with him, Trent Baalke, and I'm curious to see what they do and how quick of a study he is. He's been really good at evaluating players at the high school level for college. It's a different game. You can't go out and get them all. It's a big challenge.
Absolutely. And another comment we have is change of scenery and coaching staff could be good for Darnold. We already talked about that. Yep. We absolutely agree. And question for you, what would you say is the most important attributes when projecting a QB success at the next level? And obviously you talked about how the game has changed. Maybe someone who wasn't as mobile could have done a lot better in even as early as like 10 years ago, whereas now that's a big part of the game. So what do you think in today's game matters most for a QB success in terms of just traits?
Quarterback play, when you talk about, first of all, as a passer, there are two things. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into these two. But does a quarterback know where to go with the football, and can he get it there accurately? The most important physical quality is accuracy. Arm strength is a big part of accuracy. If you can't have enough zip on the ball, throwing it out and being accurate to keep it on line where it needs to be, there's a certain basic level of arm strength that you need. The guy with the strongest arm versus the guy that is strong enough, that doesn't give you a lot of advantages. But there's difference between arm strength and the ability to throw the ball deep. Throwing deep really comes from your legs. Throwing outside the numbers and throwing off platform is arm strength. Mahomes, again, to use as an example, when he can throw the football throwing parallel to the ground, there's no legs coming into that. That's just arm strength. That's God-gifted. That's unique. What makes that difficult to defend is you can get the ball in a place that maybe others can't. But if they're different type of guys. If you're a guy from the pocket, setting your feet affects your accuracy. But, the game is changed. It's not pitching. You're not on a mound. I mean, the game moves. So the ability to throw it accurately on the move. But the first thing I need to know is I need to grade a quarterback's capacity to learn and willingness to learn. What is that? How smart is he? What can he learn? I don't care what he knows about the game. I care what he knows relative to what he's been taught. Okay, I want to know a guy's ability to learn. I teach him, and there are drills that we can put where we teach him, we go back, and we talk about other things, and we come back and say, now go back on the board and tell me what I told you 15 minutes ago. What's their ability to recall and understand it, and what's their willingness to do it? I don't care what it is. What you guys are doing now, and doing such a great job, by the way, I may add, it's about what's your desire. If you are just doing it like a lot of people in society, let's call it what it is. I got a job. I don't really like it. It pays the bills, whatever. That's not football. If you're a pass rusher and you can rush the passer and you got limited knowledge, you're not crazy about the game, but you can get away with it to a certain degree. If you're a quarterback and you don't love the game, if you don't eat, sleep, drink the game, if you're not compelled to be the first one there, you're never going to be as good as you can be. The gym rat effect. Those are two things, but mental ability, competitiveness. Okay. A guy that when you do that exudes leadership. Quick story. Parcells is one of my mentors. So Drew Brees is drafted by Parcells. Comes in as a rookie. He's all gung-ho. He comes into the office, look at film at 6 o'clock in the morning. He's, doing all this and all that kind of stuff. And after a while, Parcells calls him in and says, how's it going? And, yeah, coach, I'm coming in. I'm doing this. He said, yeah, I know. I see. You see it about 6:15, 6:30. You end in time. You look at film and you says, but let me tell you how you're going to do it from now on. He says you're going to get in at 5:15. And you're going to look at the film before we get together as an offensive group. I want you to look at the film so that when you're in that meeting with the coordinator, you've already seen it and you already have the answers. And, oh, by the way, you're going to bring the donuts in for the veterans. So what that does is, and he learned it. He didn't know. He was, he's in there early enough. He's the first guy. Now he's going to come in earlier. So now when he's in that meeting, and all the offensive guys, players, he's got the answer. They start, hey, this kid knows what he's doing. He knows it. They begin to develop confidence. Confidence is not something that you can go buy or rent. You got to earn it, right? Well, how do you earn it? You have to know what you're talking about. They have to believe in you. And that starts in the classroom setting. It starts in the practice field. And if you do those things, so are you that type of guy? What's your mental ability? What's your competitiveness? Accuracy is important. Certainly, I break down and study the release type and the quickness and the arm strength and the body size and production. Look, if you're Drew Brees, you can't be, it doesn't matter. You can be 6 feet. Any quarterback can be 6 feet. It doesn't matter because Drew Brees did it. No. Drew Brees was successful because even though he lacked the metric and he was height deficient, he had the certain areas that allowed him to overcome it. He was explosive from under center. He can get deeper in the pocket quicker. Kyler Murray's having to do that. So there are things you can do to overcome it, but not everybody can overcome it. It's not like, every 5'9" linebacker is going to be the next Sam Mills. You know how many 5'9" linebackers are the next Sam Mills? About 1,500. None of them were. So what are you doing to overcome it? So those are the things to me. It's the mental awareness, the competitiveness, the accuracy. Those are things are really important. But just the mental part of the game, the toughness, all those things, and then how well you can have those things if you're on a bad team. How good is Matthew Stafford? Really? We know he has a lot of those things, but many people don't think of Matt Stafford as a great quarterback. I think he's a great talent. I think that they've not done a really good job with him in Detroit. And I think we've kind of exhausted that point, but that's a big part of it. I've seen a lot of good quarterbacks do a really, really good job in having all these things, but you can't do it by themselves. They're the most dependent. Most important, but most dependent. Tom Brady, love him. They don't go to the Super Bowl without Tom Brady. Okay, there's no doubt in my mind. But Tom Brady was with the Jets of Detroit this past year. They're not going to the playoffs. So the point is he, in a good situation, he elevated the Patriots. He made it different for the Patriots. You see the effect of him not being on the Patriots. Big factor. But he also picked a good team in Tampa that was kind of a quarterback away, and he lifted them up. But he didn't lift them by himself. He had talent around him. I think we lose sight of that. You guys deal with that all the time. You deal with fans all the time, that the quarterback is the sexiest position. It's the one that's most talked about. It is the most important, but it is the most dependent, and they can't do it by themselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and
Real
I think
quick,
as far as quarterbacks, go ahead, read that comment.
I was just going to say, we got a comment from Twitch saying, God, I miss Gruden's QB camp. We need Chris to pick up the mantle. Chris, we got some fans clamoring you for getting your job.
I like everybody, man.
Too, man.
It's a piece of work. Yeah, he hadn't had a quarterback. John hadn't had a quarterback he doesn't like. He is the proverbial.
He didn't really like Chris Sims.
He is the proverbial, high school kid going through puberty. Every girl is the prettiest girl walking at the school dance. He loves them all. Loves them all. The next guy is his favorite one.
So obviously, the two ways to win in the NFL are one, a good QB on a rookie deal, or two, a great QB in a team-friendly deal. So it's either, look at it. These rookie deal quarterbacks or Tom Brady have been winning basically every Super Bowl. Circling a little Peyton Manning at the end of his career there, which is crazy. But Rick here says it seems to him that many of the younger quarterbacks are unable to read defenses like they once were. Has the rise of the freak athletes caused this shift, or is the college game, maybe, because everybody's in the shotgun now, not done a good job of preparing these kids for probably reading defenses?
Well, it is the college game. The college game has kind of infiltrated the pro game to some degree, and it is a lot of shotgun. And then, they got to play right away. You see, the way it used to work is you draft before I was in the league, when I started in the league, when you didn't have free agency, you drafted a guy, no rookie quarterback would ever start. I don't care who it is. It would be Rodgers, Staubach. They all sat. Nobody does that now. It's, let's go ahead and we got to put him in. We need to see what we have. He's on a rookie contract, but we need to know before. And yet, so again, Josh Allen, a lot of things. Struggled to read defenses, but good team around him. He progressed. Brian Daboll did a good job with him, but they did a good job around him. So, yes, it's a lot of the college game that's a little different, and you're having to make that adjustment, and you're having to throw them in right away. Well, they're all going to struggle. Everybody struggles. Peyton struggled. Brady didn't play until he got thrown in. They all struggle to some degree. And the ones that don't struggle, the teams can kind of cover that up a little bit, and it's because they're having to play right away. I think there's a process to learning the position. Learn it in the classroom and being able to take it onto the practice field. And when you take it onto the practice field, then you got to be able to take it to the game. And if people will say things like you can't learn until you play, and that's not true. You can learn certain things. I equate it to this. I don't know if you guys play golf, but a lot of people play golf, and when the swing is bad, they go to the driving range and they get a biggest bucket of balls that they can, and they beat balls and thinks they're getting better. Well, practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. If you go and hit a bunch of balls and you just repeat the bad habits, then you're just ingraining bad habits. A lot of times what you do with young quarterbacks, you throw them onto the field, you utilize their athletic ability, their arm talent. They don't necessarily know what to do, and you kind of teach them as they go. Well, of course, you're not going to be good at reading defenses. And first of all, it's a different read. It's a different look. There are things you can do to create matchups with certain players to where you can have a high-low read, a half-field read. That's pretty simple to read, but it's not the complete field. Well, again, it's a little more of a challenge to be consistently successful in the NFL, but you can still be successful and tail around it, and you have to put the young guy on the field. Back in the day, you didn't. So it's going to continue to be that way because you're playing these guys younger and younger.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see now what happens with Teddy Bridgewater. Does Darnold definitely start? But we do know one thing, Michael. The Panthers are not going to be drafting the quarterback here. So why don't we take a look at your rankings, and then, of course, we're going to have to address how things are going to impact it here with the Panthers definitely not going quarterback.
Absolutely. And we're going to start out with the 10 through 6. So at number 10, I got Ian Book, quarterback out of Notre Dame. At the college level, he was a phenomenal QB. Quick, mobile, has a nice release. He worked really well off script, which I think is encouraging for his potential at the NFL level. But there's still issues in terms of his overall arm talent. He doesn't lead his receivers as well in the quick game as you would like to see. And there's still some throwing motion issues. Hopefully, at the NFL level, if he does find that success, breaks free as this sleeper QB that really, finds success in the NFL, it's something that's going to have to come with, first off, depending heavily on that mobility and quick game that he has been so efficient at in the college level, but also fixing up his throwing motion a little bit, being better at leading his receivers, and really just capitalizing on the short game. Because yes, there is a potential for growth with the arm strength at the next level, but I do think that as far as we've seen from Ian Book, the arm strength isn't going to be there with the top of the league. So you kind of look at how he can work in that short to intermediate game, and I think there is potential to be enticed, and that's why he's made here at number 10. At number 9, looking at Davis Mills, one of the most talked about QBs outside of the major 5, and that's because there's so much unknown about him. He's a quick mover. Outside of the hashes, he throws phenomenally well, but there's some issues in terms of how he throws downfield for me. I understand, there's been some questions called on Stanford's offense because it's this traditional pro offense that hasn't really adapted to the new style of the league. And maybe in a more shotgun-heavy approach, in a better downfield system, he could find success. But one of the biggest question marks about Davis Mills is that he hasn't had much time on the field. Sat behind Costello for a long time at Stanford. And this year, due to the pandemic, there was only 6 games for Stanford to play in. He played in 5. I do think that there is potential here with Davis Mills. Personally, for me, I view him as a backup style QB, but there is definitely some entice, and some people that I respect a lot as scouts think that he could be the steal of this draft for the QB class. At number 8, I look at Kyle Trask, and this may be a little bit low for a lot of people. What I really have issues with is he's a little bit immobile. Mobility has become such a big part of the NFL in this era, and he just struggles. And it's not just that he's a pocket passer, it's also that he can't move around in the pocket that well. A lot of his throws are one gear, they don't really have a lot of zip on them. And the overall arm talent in terms of really extending the field, especially when you are a pocket passer like Kyle Trask will be, there's just not a lot to put all over the field. So he's a short to intermediate guy. He demonstrates very nice touch. You watch the Georgia game, and even going against some solid corners like Tyson Campbell, he was able to put balls where only his receivers could get it. So there's definitely potential here, and I think this is someone that very easily could be a spot starter, viewed in a very highlight as a backup role that goes earlier than maybe some people expect. But in terms of overall ceiling, I'm a little bit hesitant on investing in Kyle Trask. At number 7, I got Jamie Newman. I have the Wake Forest logo. Obviously, he went to Georgia. There's going to be big question marks for a lot of scouts out there trying to figure out really the situation in Georgia and how they want to address that, because really he should have been the starter there. JT Daniels also transfers to Georgia and he opts out. You can say it's because of the pandemic. I think a lot of people kind of feel, though, that it is because he was worried that he would lose his starting spot. In terms of what we saw on film, though, and that's as much as we can talk about, is there's arm talent. He puts a lot of velocity on these passes. He's a very mobile and aggressive player. He throws downfield. He has the discipline to not just fire deep all the time, but he does attack downfield at a very efficient rate, which you love to see out of a young QB. In terms of negatives in his games, I don't see a lot of precision in his passing. You don't see a lot of balls right on the numbers, and I think that's a big issue for him. Fixing up his mechanics, and again, it's another inexperienced issue for Jamie Newman that we'll have to see how he grows with time, and hopefully he'll get that in the preseason and in NFL building. At number 6, I got Kellen Mond, and this is one of the biggest question marks in this class as well, because there's so much potential here. But even at Texas A&M, you saw it. One game he'd come out, throw 23 for 27, 300 yards, 4 touchdowns, and the next game he'd come out and throw 11 for 27, 143 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. So there's inconsistency and streakiness in his play. He underthrows plenty of passes, and he has some bad decisions on tape. You see it. He makes the wrong read. He still throws it. And, maybe the interceptions were limited this year, but there were still plenty of balls out there that were bad. Looking at him from the strength perspective, though, there's natural arm talent. He's a mobile and physical runner. He can extend plays, and he handles pressure well. So if you have a guy that can really help him out taking those next steps, Kellen Mond could be a great pick in this draft. I look at places like Pittsburgh, places like Washington, where you have a veteran in place, so you aren't forcing him into the fire if something, really needs to happen and he shows himself, you can put him in. But I think this is a place where you're looking at this guy in the third round, and if you can get him somewhere where he can sit and hopefully develop and grow his game, you could be looking at getting a starter with your day 2 pick. Chris, of these 10 QBs, or of these 5 QBs here that are outside the top 5, do you see anyone that really entices you as their next level projection, or do you think, you kind of agree with the rankings, I guess?
Yeah, there's only 6 guys that I think have a chance to be starters out of this quarterback draft class. Kyle Trask would be the only one that would fit into that category in chance. Now, the thing about doing a board, and I've got the quarterback board, I've got my horizontal board up, and I'm doing the position boards day by day, and quarterbacks are up on LandryFootball.com. And so obviously when you're doing a board for the entire league, it's not possible. First of all, everybody has a different board. So if you're working on a pocket system, you're going to like what a Mac Jones is going to do. You like what a Kyle Trask is going to do. If you want more mobility, you're not going to be as high on them, but you got to factor that in. I think in a pocket system, I think Kyle can be effective, and I think he's worth developing. And to me, I think Davis Mills can be a really solid backup in the league. The guy that intrigues me, that has some natural ability that I'd like to develop down the road, would be Jamie Newman. Really liked his tape at Wake Forest. I know he didn't play well against Clemson, again, overmatched with in terms of talent there, but he's got some ability to make plays off platform, but he's very raw. I thought he made a mistake by not playing this year, at least not practicing. I didn't care if he started. You look at where his draft. I mean, he's just out of sight, out of mind, and that you got to go back to the Wake Forest. So I think that I'm not as high on. There's some personnel directors that I've worked with that are like Kellen Mond, that think he's a top 50 prospect. I am not one of those. Not a believer in him. I think Jimbo does a great job with quarterbacks. You mentioned, I think it was Nick that was talking about going through the list of E.J. Manuel and Christian Ponder and guys. Jimbo does a great job teaching the run game and really creates a lot of spacing and coverage. I think Kellen has got some physical skills, but I am not comfortable with his accuracy, his ability to get the ball out on time. So I've got a lower round grade on him. So they have numbers on the board, and if you go to LandryFootball.com, you see it. So you got the superstar ability guys, and you got one guy there, and you've got like what I would call immediate starters or early starters, and they're 3, and then you've got potential starters, which would be depending on the situation. Now, obviously you may be forced into start, even though you're not quite graded there. But then the chance to make guys would be most of the guys that you've got there in my mind. And then, I think there's the potential backup guys, which are some other guys that I think are just camp guys that, but I only see 6 guys, and obviously you probably know who those are that are going to have a chance to start out of this draft in my mind.
Absolutely. And we move on to the top 5. First and foremost, I want to bring up my grading scale. So what I do is I look at it from an immediate impact, a letter grade for how I think they come into the league, and then a long-term projection with a number grade. So if someone had an A1 grade, that would mean that I think immediately they come in and they're going to be an efficient player, a high-quality starter, and then they have the ceiling and projection of a superstar. Now, I do want to warn you guys, I'm a little bit Gruden-esque, I guess, in terms of projections. I want these guys to succeed. I look at their ceiling, maybe a little bit more flattering than they will actually turn out. But at the same time, there are some issues that could potentially look at, someone like a Fields, who I have a 1 on for their long-term projection, could easily have their issues and be in that 3, 4, maybe even 5 whenever we look at it down the road. And then there's guys that maybe I have a grade on that I'm low on, and they could easily overcome that grade. So I don't want you to think that just because I'm giving someone a 2, I don't think there's any chance they can become a superstar, but that's just where I see them ending up in. So first and foremost, we start at QB5, and for me, it's Mac Jones. Quick processor. In terms of what Alabama did this year, a lot of people want to say, oh, you had so much talent on that roster. John Mechie's an excellent receiver, but losing Jalen Waddle, he doesn't get enough credit for. Mac Jones made things happen for Alabama, and I think he's shown so much in terms of passing ability, anticipation, leading his receivers into space, and it was phenomenal. A lot of people don't like him because, he's this traditional pocket passer. He's not going to beat anyone with his legs. Yes, he can move around. He put up a great pro day to where you can see the potential to move around in the pocket, and he showed that. But still, there's issues in terms of his arm isn't going to be in the upper echelon of QBs. He's not going to really wow you like Patrick Mahomes or even someone like a Kyler Murray, where those natural, balls just fly out of there. But he still can put a very nice ball out there. The issue I have most with Mac Jones is there's so many times where he gets pressured and he falls onto his back, he falls back on his feet, and it takes off so much on his passes. You've seen it in games against Georgia. You've seen it in games at the big level where, these guys will come flying in, and he, instead of, either taking the hit, throwing the ball out of bounds, throwing the ball short, he'll still try to throw it deep, and he'll be on his back feet, and it's a terrible ball. So he needs to fix that, and hopefully with coaching, with growth and development, that will happen. In terms of my grade, I gave him a C2. I think a lot of these QBs that maybe aren't as fast are going to still have the same issues in terms of reading defenses and trying to develop. So we'll see a lot of maybe boring games for Mac Jones in his first year, a lot of quick passing games, a lot of limited offense, a lot of dependency on the run game. So he gets that C grade. But I do think that with proper development, in the right team, in the right opportunity, he could work his way up to being a very good starter. Looking at it, I have a comparison to Kirk Cousins, and Kirk was a round 4 pick, but really worked his way up into becoming a very efficient quarterback, probably in the higher half of this league, despite, maybe some people kind of not being in love with the idea of spending a first-round pick on a QB that ends up like a Kirk Cousins. A lot of a lot of front offices in the league would love to have Kirk Cousins on a rookie contract for the price of a round 1 pick. So Mac Jones, obviously there's a lot of talent here. He had big shoes to fill in with Tua last year. Didn't necessarily look great right away, but then in this year, he really became a superstar for Alabama. Chris, I'd love to get your opinion on Mac Jones and what you saw out of him on film.
Well, he's a pocket guy. He does a really good job of identifying pressure, but he does play from a clean pocket, and he's going to need to play from a clean pocket. I think that it is accurate that when he's not able to have a clean pocket, it's tough for him to get, pocket guys throw, as I said earlier, from their lower body, lower platform, legs. So, that'll be an issue. The issue is going to be a lot like, say, Joe Burrow last year. Now you're talking about a guy with talent. They were loaded with talent, and Joe was great at LSU without a clean pocket. And I thought Burrow did really well, all things considered. How well Mac Jones is going to be directly correlated to the protection and the ability to play from a clean pocket. You mentioned it as, his arm strength. Well, that's why if he's off platform, he's not going to be able to make a lot of arm only throws and be as effective. So if you're looking at that, it's kind of like, what are you looking for in a quarterback? And people are all over the mix. It's like Lardell Carlott. You might have the best, minivan out there, but if you don't want that and you want an SUV, you don't really care what it looks like. If you want a pocket guy, and that's what you're going to do, and you believe in, okay, I want decision maker, get the ball out on time accurately, and I'm going to build a pocket on him, then he can be very effective, very good starter. But if you're putting him and say he's going to have to do a multitude of things, he's going to be limited. So it to me, he's a really easy evaluation. It's just how successful he will be more directly correlated to what you do around him, and that is provide a clean pocket. And it's not good because there's talent around him. He's good because they protect him well, and he can get the ball to the talent around him because he gets it out on time and accurately, and he'll be able to do that at the next level, provided he gets the same requisite protection, which is going to be a lot different, particularly with likely where he's going to go. Who knows?
Absolutely. We got to keep moving. We're running out of time here. QB4, Zach Wilson. I'm sure a lot of people may be surprised by this because I'm a little bit lower on Wilson than a lot of people are. That doesn't mean I dislike him. He's an absolute playmaker. You look at what he can do with his arm angles. He can throw the ball sidearm and still put it 20 yards on the line down the field. He's a playmaker. He can move around. He can adapt to any pressures, and he has confidence. That's one big thing that I think shares that comparison to Baker Mayfield. You look at what Baker was doing at Oklahoma, and there's so much of that same stuff that we see now with Zach Wilson. There's so much confidence in it. The year-to-year performances are so much different because once you get going, it's hard to stop. And I think that's a big part of Zach Wilson's game, and he works it well. Some of my issues, though, a lot of deep throws were kind of getting away with it. I think he got away with a lot of deep passes to a guy like Milne, a guy like even his tight end Rex, or even guys like Romney, where, you're just throwing it and the cornerback doesn't make a good play on it. It's not going to happen as well at the NFL level. There were small bad habits. I didn't love some of the ways that he would kind of quickly pull away from a play action. It's just small stuff, and it's nitpicking, and I understand that. He's a very talented QB, obviously 33 touchdowns, 3 interceptions on the year, nearly 4,000 yards. I gave him a B2 grade. I do think that there is a little bit of limitation on him, and he doesn't have as high a ceiling as the other 3 QBs that we'll talk about. But I do think that, put him in a place like the Jets. If they build up this team well around him, he's not going to stop you from potentially taking that next step as a team and becoming a contender. And I'm sure a lot of people are a lot higher on him than I am. Some people I've heard have him at QB1. Some teams have been rumored to have him at QB1. So what do I know? But I'm just saying, this is my QB4. Chris, what are your thoughts on Zach Wilson?
Can make plays off platform. He's very accurate. I think he does a good job there. I think the thing, very confident. The thing is if he ends up going 2, personality-wise, he's the exact opposite of Sam Darnold in New York. What I mean by that, Sam Darnold has got kind of the California cool. You criticize him, it doesn't bother him. He doesn't pay attention to that. This kid's the type of guy it's gonna bother him, and no one criticizes more than the New York or Philly media. So worry a little bit there if he struggles, how he's going to deal with the negativity, because it's going to come with the territory. So dealing with that, he's got a little bit. I think he's a lot like Baker Mayfield personality-wise. You know how Baker was? It took him a while. Somebody criticized him. He had to snap back. Well, you can't do that. You just got to let that roll off your back. I mean, you can say what you want, but if it bothers you, it's going to affect you. So I hope it doesn't bother him like it did Baker. Baker's kind of developed a little bit more maturity. This guy will need to as well.
And looking at QB3, we got Trey Lance, quarterback out of North Dakota State. Measured in at 6'4" in his pro day, 224 pounds, an excellent frame. Obviously, due to the FCS restrictions, he wasn't playing this year. But in 2019, 28 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Had a little bit of struggles against Central Arkansas, but there's a lot to like on tape. What I liked most about Trey Lance is, there's definitely untapped potential with his arm. He can put the ball anywhere. He can put it on a lob, or he can throw deep on a line, and it's really impressive. He's a great runner, and I think that's going to be huge for him. A lot of people say that Trey Lance, in terms of day one readiness, is going to have his issues. I think he definitely will, but I think he can find success early if that happens for him, because he is a great runner, and he can depend on extending plays, getting outside of the pocket when needed, and that'll be huge for finding success early. He handles pressure well. He's able to stay in the pocket and maneuver in the pocket, which I think is huge for a scrambling QB that has the rushing ability that he has. Some issues, though. There were plenty of times on crossing routes where he put the ball behind them. There's, issues processing, making proper reads. There's a lot of lower level defenses that he will kind of overlook when playing downfield as a passer. So he's got to be better in that. And I think that comes with experience, and getting more starts, more game time under him will be huge in terms of what we see out of him in growth. I think this is a guy that, I have him at QB3, but if I'm a coach and I 100% believe in my ability to develop a QB, I'm looking at Trey Lance and I'm saying this is probably my guy, because there's so much there to work with. And I think if you are an expert like a Kyle Shanahan at developing QBs, Trey Lance probably is one of the most enticing options because what he can become is QB1 in this class when looking at hindsight. Chris, what do you think of Trey Lance? And in terms of landing spot, how important is it for a prospect with his potential, but also, some rawness in his game?
Yeah, he's got a lot of upside ability. He's got a lot of athleticism. He's got a gun for an arm. Thing he's got to be able to do is anticipate, see the field better, get the ball out on time. That's the reason why a lot of those balls are late. I do think he's a guy that needs to sit. I think a lot of these guys do, but this guy more than even normal needs to sit, needs to learn. It is intriguing. Obviously San Francisco moved up with the idea they like 3 of them, and so one of them's going to be there. If this is the guy, for example, being able to sit, if that's what they do, and Kyle does want to embrace a little bit more of a mobile guy, it would be intriguing, and that's where he would not be counted on to have to come in and play immediately. And look, you could come around and run around and make some plays, that's fine, but the development's going to take a little while, and so that's the biggest challenge there. And I wish he'd had a full year and a full slate of games to be able to evaluate, not just to evaluate, but to develop, because I do think coming from that offense, a lot of the things that he sees and a lot of things that they do a little bit more related to the pro game, but he missed that opportunity as we all did in this awful COVID year.
Absolutely. And at QB2, I got Justin Fields. I've heard all this stuff about him, but I'm really sold on him. There's some issues. He has a messy delivery. The ball kind of sputters out. And I think that really kind of hurts his overall arm talent because what we've seen, talking about what Chris has talked about many times, I think he has plenty of arm talent itself, but I think getting that delivery fixed is going to be huge in terms of unleashing that. There's plays where he will throw across the field and it goes on an absolute rope, but there's also some plays, you saw it in the Indiana game when he got intercepted. The ball just died down in the middle of the field. If he can fix up his passing mechanics, if he can, kind of discipline himself to not try to make these hero ball plays where he breaks a sack and he's saying, okay, I need to get rid of the ball right away. If he's willing to, either take a sack, throw the ball out of bounds, whatever, that's going to be huge. Obviously, in an Ohio State offense, there's a lot of reads that are very simple. So I think that's going to also take some time to develop and kind of make this NFL style offense more, dependent on can he make those processing reads. And instead of, staring down wide receivers, I don't think it's so much an issue as his processing, because I think there were plenty of times where he showed a great ability to do it. But I do think there's times where he decides pre-snap, I want to throw it to him, and he'll completely miss someone wide open. So Justin Fields, obviously got away with it because he's such a talented player, but there's going to be some growing pains at the NFL level that he needs to overcome himself. In terms of what I love about him, though, there's so much accuracy here, and he's one of the more accurate passers in the league, or in the college football level. And he's got great mobility, great size, 6'3", 227, 22 years old, just turned it, so he's going to be 22 for his entire rookie year. And I think, really, if you can clean up what is a currently messed up delivery, you're going to unleash someone that has great arm talent, great mobility, great accuracy, and putting all those 3 together is going to be huge for his development, huge for his confidence, and you could have a superstar in this league. Justin Fields is someone that I am super high on, and I'm hoping as a Patriots fan that we end up with him. Chris, what are your thoughts on Justin Fields and, the rumors that he's kind of viewed as his QB4? Where do you see him landing?
Well, he's going to go high. I mean, real high. The quarterbacks are going to come off real quick. And obviously for people that are just joining us live by now, people that are listening, they know that Sam Darnold was traded. Carolina was the team that I was looking to try to move up in a position to take a quarterback and not hoping and waiting for a guy at 8. They got their quarterback in Sam Darnold, so they handled that. It's going to be interesting to see, though, if any of these guys, quote-unquote, gets not left out, but drop a little bit. I don't think it'll be Justin. I think Justin's got great leadership ability. I think he's got great toughness. I think he's got good size. I do think he throws accurately on the move. Look, I think he understands his offense very well. He doesn't have a lot of football in him, meaning he hadn't played a lot. None of these guys do. Don't play as long as they used to before. If you have a really good year, you're usually coming out if you're eligible, or you can come out early. So I think this guy, he knows the offense that he's asked to run, and I think he'll get better as time goes along. I think this guy's a winner. I think he's got everything you look for, and I think he'll be a high pick. Exactly where? Don't know. Maybe that's the guy that San Francisco goes with. I don't know. We all think we know what the Jets are going to do at 2 and who they like and who San Francisco likes. I mean, I think that it is, after Trevor Lawrence, I think it's Fields, Wilson Fields, and I think that there's a little bit of a mix, and I don't know. I'm guessing it's going to be Wilson and Fields. I think that's how both the Jets and the Niners have them stacked on their board, but that's a guess because nobody truly knows what's in their board. I do work with these teams, and I'm in meetings with them, and I don't know what their board's exactly like.
Yeah, and I think this trade that Carolina has made has kind of shown us that QB is going 1 through 4 in what should be a crazy situation. Whether that's Atlanta making the pick at number 4 or another team trading up, it does seem like the QBs are going to be flying off the board and fast. It's an interesting situation. Real quick, before we talk about QB1, I want to ask you, do you think that this is just the new norm to trade up for a QB in this, early picks? Like going 1 through 4 is crazy. Or do you think it's a little bit of hesitancy looking ahead to the next year's draft class that maybe doesn't have as much appeal even early on when people are looking at it with rose-colored glasses?
It's not next year because you don't know. There's not enough football played now by these guys to look ahead to next year. It's like no one would have thought last year at this time that we'd be considering Mac Jones as a high pick. A year ago, there's no way that you would have said Joe Burrow would have been the number 1 pick in the draft. It was what they did. So you don't know. It's not like when I first got in the business 30-plus years ago as a scout, you had 3 years of a guy. You knew what he was. Now you maybe have a guy that's played 1 full year. You think he's got some ability, but, now he's going to his junior year. So it's not about next year. I mean, you know what's there next year, but you really don't know. You don't know exactly how it's going to play out. I think it's a byproduct of you like some of these guys. You think they have value. It is you don't have to pay them as much as you used to on a rookie contract. So it's worth developing. It's worth a chance. Give it a shot. That's what it's all about. And I don't know. Be honest with you, Carolina was the team that I thought was likely if they could move into the top 4. I don't know that we're going to go the first 4 quarterbacks. I think it's going to be 3. I don't think Atlanta's going quarterback. I don't know who's jumping up. I don't know that Denver is going to jump up and do it. So this tells me with the Carolina trade of Sam Darnold today, it could mean that we have 2 of those guys. Of the 5, 2 of them, quote unquote, slip, meaning, people that think they're going to go 4. Some of them may slip a little bit, meaning, I don't to where they're 8 or 10 because I don't know who's going to take them. Cincinnati's not doing it. Miami's not going to do it, I don't think. Maybe would Detroit do it? Probably not. They're probably going to go in a different direction. Carolina, no. Would Denver do it? Would Dallas? So who's coming up? I mean, would Philadelphia now move back up and get into the quarterback business if Mac Jones or Trey Lance slips? I don't know. Maybe Atlanta takes their future quarterback, but I tend to doubt it what they've done with Matt Ryan. So I think today's move with Sam Darnold makes it an intrigue that maybe one of these guys that don't go in the top 3 might slip a little bit unless somebody moves up because I don't know exactly where they're going. And I know that not everybody's quarterback shopping as much as it looks like everybody is.
Yeah, I guess my thought process on it was just maybe Carolina tried to call Atlanta and Atlanta was saying, look, if you want your franchise QB, it's not coming from us because we aren't giving it inside the division.
Well, and here's the thing, too. If you're Atlanta, look, if you're sitting there, you're Atlanta, you're at 4, 5, and 6. You are in a position at those 3 picks. And I know we're running a little long, but to hell with it, I run the network, so we can go as long as y'all got time.
The boss says they're good to go.
So if you're at 4, 5, and 6, you will get one of the top 3 players on your draft board because the quarterbacks are being artificially moved up. So if you're not in the quarterback need business, you're getting. If you're Atlanta, you can get a Penei Sewell if that's what you want. If you're in Miami, you can get a Sewell or you can get a Jamar Chase you're gonna have a real good option. I think there absolutely. I know Atlanta's been taking calls for the 4th pick, and I still think they will. I think the price is going to be high because I think they're probably going to get most people, even though they got a quarterback, got Trevor Lawrence number 1. So Atlanta's probably going to get their number 2 player on their board at the 4th spot. So in order to get Atlanta to move, you better give them an awful lot. And so unless something, crazy happens with a non-quarterback pick, if Philly or somebody wants to move back up and get in the quarterback business, Minnesota, whatever, it's going to cost an awful lot to move down to, let's say 12 or 14. So, Cincinnati was a team that I think would have been willing to do business with Carolina. Ironically, the year I drafted McNair, that was the pick. Carolina had the number 1 pick, and that was the year that Cincinnati moved up for Kajana Carter. So, yeah, I think today's move was really interesting, not just for Carolina and the Jets, but for other spots, where we're going, where we're headed, who is maybe wanting to make a move for a quarterback. So let's assume that there's 1 or 2, say Mac Jones or Trey Lance. I'm just going to throw those 2 out. It could fill in the blank with the 2. There's a possibility that where people are thinking those, they're going, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm thinking now that we may have a quarterback or 2 that'll slip a little bit. So what does that mean for a team that still might be quarterback intrigued? Would Denver do it? With all the quarterbacks they've taken, what do they think there? George, how does he think about the quarterbacks in this draft? Because I think a Trey Lance or a Mac Jones, one of those guys is probably going to be there a little bit longer than everybody's been reporting. I don't know, everybody's guessing, but that's just the reality of it. You start doing the numbers.
Chris, I know that they just got Jared Goff, but he was more of like a throw-in. If the Lions love Trey Lance, can you see that he starts falling? Can you see them moving up for him?
Yeah, I kind of threw that in there quickly, and I don't think they'll do it. And I maybe, but absolutely, if you really like Trey Lance, and you just an example, you got a really high grade on, you like him, you really don't think, would you take him there? Yeah, would you? You would have to maybe look at that. I know the prevailing thought there is, okay, we got a quarterback, we got Jared Goff, let's put a weapon, with him. And that's what makes sense, but that's with the idea that everybody's got the 4 quarterbacks going top 4, and I don't know that's the case. And what if they think Trey Lance, for example, and this is my point that I try to make out with everybody. Don't believe, even you go to Landry football, this is how I see it. That doesn't make this is right for everybody. I've kind of graded them for the league, which is impossible. One year I did literally like the top 50 for all 32 teams, and it confused the hell out of everybody. So I stopped because, again, a player that will be graded, it's going to be graded differently team by team. What if you are that team that you think Trey Lance is, behind Trevor Lawrence, the next best quarterback in this draft, and you're there at, where Detroit picks? I mean, it's a intriguing thought and something that you don't know. I can always say this, that we didn't go crazy with mock drafts in our meetings. I never allowed us to do that. I thought it was a waste of time. All I wanted to know, if I'm picking 10, go through every scenario of who could be there. I don't care how many times you go through scenarios. And the higher you pick, the less variables. But, man, we were fortunate enough. We were picking 25 and 30 a lot. There's always a guy. There was always a guy that's in the top 10 on your board that's there. I mean, I did that one year picking 31 and got a player in the top 10 on our board. Keith Bullock was a guy. I mean, there's always that guy. So if you're sitting there and you're 8, 9, 10, there's going to be somebody maybe in your top 3 that there's no one's thinking about, which is why mock drafts may be fun. They're useless because once one move is made that's out of range, then all of a sudden it changes the thought process in everybody's board to the point where they might even maneuver and move up to try to get a guy. It's a different world inside the draft rooms than it is outside where you're trying to pick for 32 because it's the constant change, but your board is set in a way that you think certain things going to happen. and I don't care what it is. You don't know what's going on in everybody else's board, and you're going to have to adjust to the move. It's like having a game plan for a game. You got to be able to adjust on the fly, and that's what I always try to do with our guys.
Absolutely. And we're going to look at QB1 now. Trevor Lawrence. Look, it's been set in stone almost since he's stepped onto the field as a freshman. This guy has everything you're looking for in a quarterback. I've seen a lot of prospect fatigue on him out there. There's a lot of people trying to really take him down and say, oh, he's not as good as a lot of people want to expect. He's good. He's going to be a good QB in the NFL almost no matter what. The issue is, for me, I look at him, and one of the biggest things I have worries about is that he takes so much contact. Even you look at him in the Alabama championship game as a freshman, and they're up about 20 points, and he's trying to truck through linebackers. I don't want to see this guy become the next Andrew Luck, where he's this great QB, and he does well in the NFL, and then he just takes so much hits, and, maybe the offensive line around him isn't that great, and combining those two issues leads to him having a shortened career. He gets glued on targets at times. He'll stare him down. He has, a lot of first read throws, very quick decisions that he's making. I'm not going to fault him for that, but there is some, misfires. Really, it's nitpicking like I talked about with Zach Wilson. He's a great QB. There's elite arm talent. He can make off-platform throws. He does well in the pocket. He does well outside of the pocket. He can extend plays, and he's very quick to find reads. I've seen some great plays on where he's looking to the right. He sees a post coming over the middle, and he's very quick to transition his head, make the throw with a quick fire. Absolutely a day one talent that I think is going to be very good in the league right away. Definitely should become something special. It kind of comes down to how the Jacksonville Jaguars handle this roster. This offseason, Chris, the Jaguars were looked at as a team that was going to have a lot of money in a year where there wasn't a lot out there. Do you think that this kind of patient spending approach is the right way to go about it and kind of approach free agency heavy in year two of Trevor Lawrence? Or do you think that they maybe misfired on their offseason approach?
Well, I think free agency, you've got to be careful. People, tend to look at activity and think that the amount of activity determines success. I think what's important in free agency, it's different. I mean, it's similar in the draft, but then it's different because you put a value of a player in the NFL based upon, obviously, his film, based upon his medical history, his contract, all of that. And you got to put a financial value. And then quite frankly, you got to walk away. And people would say, well, you got a lot of cap room, just go a little bit more. If a guy's worth $5, you got to pay him $5. You start paying that guy $7, then the guy that's worth $7, and then you've got a roster that's overinflated and it's not very good. So I think you need to be careful with it. I think you need to build through the draft, but I think you fill needs through free agency. But I think the best values in free agency are after the first wave. I think they've done some good things. Have they done enough? I think they're trying to put the right mix together of the roster. I think it's going to depend on what they're able to do in this draft and obviously putting talent around Trevor. I think Trevor is an alpha dog leader. I remember going to Clemson this spring, speaking at a clinic the year he came out of high school, but was an early enrollee in January. So I'm there in that spring, and coaches I asked about it. I said, this kid in Georgia looks pretty good. I've seen him on tape. And he said, and this is when Kelly Bryant was the leader and team leader and all that kind of stuff, leading drills. He said, this guy is already our team leader. Trevor was, before he had ever, put anything but a practice graze on. And so he's kind of got a unique alpha dog leadership, and I think he's shown that throughout his career. Look, he's like all these guys, and he's played a lot of football because he got in early. He still doesn't have as much football as we like to have him. He's got size. He moves very well. He's got the ability to make plays. Yeah, look, a lot of those balls, particularly early in his career, he just throws it up to those receivers, and he had a whole bunch of them that throw the 50-50 balls, and those are really 70-30 balls. And, it's great. You go for big yards, a 50-yard completion, and you just throw it, let him go up and get it. I don't get hung up on that. What I get hung up as a kid is a guy like the game. Yes. Does he work hard at the game? Yes. Does he have the talent to throw? Yes. I think he's really pretty accurate. I think a lot of accuracy is about, being able to anticipate and see it. Accuracy really is throwing the ball to spots on time. But a lot of time your accuracy is hurt by the fact that you're a late read, which is why if you got a gun for an arm, you can be a little bit of a late reader and still get it there at the same time. If you have to anticipate, you have to be great. This is why guys like Peyton, Manning played so long, even though he didn't have a great arm towards the end. I think he's got all the intangibles. I think he's got all the tangibles. I think is a big reason why Urban took this job, so he could coach him, and they knew they were going to get him. I think he's really unique. Guys like that doesn't come along very often. With all that said, you just hit it. How good of a team they're going to put around him. Urban, it's a great opportunity for him. Unlike Nick, Saban and I grew up in the business together, never had that quarterback at Miami, and it never quite worked. I mean, he wasn't there very long. I think he eventually would have made it work. But to get a guy like this is you now have something that no one and everybody's going to want to try to get. So we're talking about all these teams trying to move up and trade for this quarterback and get in the position. Do we like this guy, that guy? Imagine the load of weight off your chest when you get your quarterback. Now you can take best player and put your team together. I think this sets them off in the right direction. It doesn't make them good right away, but it solves the major issue. But you just mentioned it. Got to protect him, got to do a good job. I think the difference between he and Andrew Luck was beat up a lot, and Andrew Luck was, and I had a tremendous grade on him. Andrew Luck was so smart. He had a lot of other life interests. He made a lot of money, and I think Trevor is more like football is more his life. And I know you were not making the comparison between the two, but you were making the comparison. I hope that Trevor doesn't get beat up and that's the case because I think we see that too. We see quarterbacks that are ruined and developed. Look, I thought Troy Aikman wasn't going to make it to his second year. I mean, I never seen anybody got beat up like that guy. But look what came out of the backside of it too. And God, it were awful around him, and he was awful, and he was beat up, and it was a disaster. And there were people were when they have social media like, oh, Steve Walsh is better and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, it's just be prepared for all the stuff. Let's see how well they put around them. But this is obviously set you up on the right path if you're a team in like Jacksonville. So they're in a great situation to be able to get their guy.
Absolutely. And before we leave, this is Nick Durst's rankings on the right side, my side on the left. Definitely has some hot takes. And Nick, why don't you talk about your QB ranks a little bit, your concerns maybe with some of the higher touted guys, and what you like about some of the sleepers that you have?
I mean, to me, it's just my ranking is, I feel like longevity in the NFL here. I personally only think that Lawrence and Wilson can be these career franchise quarterbacks. And, you call me crazy, but usually it's one or two per draft that actually can become these pros. I think Mond, starting with the Senior Bowl, I think him and Trask have a great opportunity to, be in this league for a long time as a backup. I certainly think you look around the league now, guys like Blaine Gabbert, he's always sticking around, and Mike Glennon. So to me, that's kind of where I had them a little higher because they're not going to come into the league. Same with Ian Book as somebody who thinks is going to start. And for me, I don't think Jones and Fields. I think Jones and Fields are going to end up, and we'll see who goes to the 49ers, but I think they're going to end up in this scenario kind of like a Sam Darnold, so that they might not get it. They'll start, and if they don't do great, then people are never going to look at them the same. Whereas I got guys like Mond, Trask, and Book coming into the league as backups, and they'll stay in the backup role, and they'll have long-term success there. Lance, I don't know. I just haven't seen enough of him. You guys seem very high on him. I got to have more of a wait and see approach here. This is not a slight on anybody or a boost over anybody. It's just that, to me, I think this is a 2 quarterback draft, and that's why there's such discrepancy here on my list. But we can get into that some other time.
Yeah, and real quick, I'm sure some people may look at this ranking and get annoyed about it or something because it's not close to the consensus. But at the same time, if you look at these rankings in hindsight of any draft class, the rankings that you'll see as a hindsight ranking compared to pre-draft rankings are way different. So, Nick, if this is your opinion, even if we disagree, even if I'm saying, hey, Trey Lance needs to be higher, Justin Fields needs to be higher, there's going to be differences. My list isn't going to be correct.
Yeah, and like my main thing when looking at quarterbacks, maybe it's not the best way to do it, but so far I've been proven right in the last 15 years. I'm very weary when it comes to taking a quarterback where they're the big man on campus at a huge football school. So that's Alabama, Ohio State, and USC. To me, it just, this isn't fair to the Fields or Mac Jones here, but based on the history of their predecessors, they always seem to have a tough transition going into the NFL because they're so used to winning and being the man, and then they're going to usually a crappy team, and they're going to deal with losing for the first time in their life, and they don't seem to adapt too well.
I gotcha. Well, that is what we have for Destination Draft Day. Chris Landry on the show today. It went a little bit over time. We appreciate everyone in the comment section and everyone who viewed it that stuck around. Chris, before we sign off officially, looking at all the mock drafts, all the draft hype, if there's one player that you think has been underrated, in terms of he's going to go a lot higher than what people are expecting for him, who is it, and who would you say is maybe underrated everywhere? The NFL doesn't agree, the fans don't agree, but you love them.
You'd have to help me because I don't read the mock drafts. I'm trying to think who that would be. Somebody that would go higher than maybe people might know. How about the Veratucca kid out of USC? I think is really good. I don't know how people have them. The mock drafts have them. But that's a guy that's a really good player, and I think he's one of the top dozen players in this draft. So I think he'll go maybe a little bit higher. I think we'll see a couple of tackles go. I think we'll see the edge rushers are not as good. So when they kind of go more inching towards the middle of the first round, those are that position would normally go in the top 5 or 6. Would somebody jump up and reach a little bit once they get it? It's possible there. So, but I don't know that it's. Remember this too, and it's just again, it's kind of the way I do it, and I have it on Landry Football. It's grading the player and understanding how many fit into the overall, superstar ability, immediate starters. You see where the breakoff points are, and that's the key because that's where you see why people move down or up in the draft. Because when you're picking at 30 and you got a chance to move up to 16 to get a player that you got ranked 6 on your board, that's why they do it. Or, it's why you move from, 6 down to 18 because you've got a number of guys that are graded equally. And so you can move down 10 spots and you're going to get one of those 10, and so you get more picks. So I think, to me, that's the key, and that's the art of the draft. The science, to me, is evaluating and grading players correctly, setting your draft board with integrity. Then when you do that, then you let the board dictate to you. And I think a lot of it is, well, let's mock draft this, mock draft that, so let's see who's my team, my favorite team needs XYZ position. That's the next guy of the name I read. None of that really matters because if you don't know how good the player is or whether he fits what you want to do, then, the fact that he might be ranked on some universal board doesn't mean that he's an ideal fit to play guard or tackle, or, he may be more of a press man corner, doesn't play as well off. He doesn't really fit your scheme, so he's not going to be as good a fit for your team. And you'd be really surprised. Somebody that's ranked 9th on one team's draft board might be ranked 29th on the other. And I don't think people quite get that. And so people see things differently among the 32 teams. And I see it all the time. And now I see it more because I do consulting work with teams. When I was just kind of involved with one, I knew what we liked. And it was always comical, guys, because we sit there in the draft room and say, we look at somebody else's board and we say, what the hell were they thinking? Because I don't like either one of those first 4 picks that they got. And you know what they're probably saying in their draft room? What the hell is Landry and those guys think? Because they don't, it doesn't fit. You'd be really surprised. And so I see now dealing with different teams, man, how truly, I'm not just how they grade the player, but the style of player that they want. Look at the receivers in this draft. You got 3 guys in my mind with 6.5 grades that are a high first round value. all three are different. They're all three different type of receivers, and what you want is really depends upon the style you're running. And do you need a slot guy more than you need an X guy more than a Z? That's going to probably take you to who you take. So those are some of my thoughts on kind of where things might go. And there's, to me, not going to be a lot of surprises. You're going to see maybe a couple of quarterbacks drop a little bit. And that means if quarterback drops, somebody's moving up. Or, then you say the question's going to be, what happened to fill in the blank, these two quarterbacks? Well, just do the math. Somebody's got to come up with those quarterbacks, because I don't think that Atlanta might, but I don't think so. Cincinnati's not taking one. Miami's not taking one. So if somebody's not trading up into those spots, then they're dropping. It's, a little bit if you're thinking they're all going in the top 4 or 5, because I don't think they are.
Absolutely. Well, we got to get out of here. We appreciate everyone for showing up, and thank you, Chris, for coming on the show.
Hey, keep it great. Thanks for all you do. You guys do a great job. I appreciate it. Keep up the good work.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you so much, and we'll see you guys on Friday. Take care, everyone.